Alright, welcome back everyone. Today we're going to take a look at the last of our level 2 concepts, which is the use of called methods. Up to this point we've been working with the static void main method, which is the natural starting point for the entry of the compiler and the program when it runs. We're going to be creating our own ones. So at this stage we've been working with this static void main string args, which stands for arguments, and basically dealing with the console.writeLine and readLine, which is dealing with strings, and it's got a natural name there of main. This void thing in static we'll get into at a later point. So up to this point here, because we have been dealing with just this, we're going to go through and show you how we can create our own new method. So a method's going to either just kind of be self-contained blocks of code that run all by themselves. They can also be pass things they might need to do their jobs, and they can also return things back to the item that called it. So these are the three things that we're going to take a look at today. So we're going to just develop a simple program that uses many of the concepts that we've used to this point. So straight away we're going to go through and develop a program or a method, and we'll give it a name. So I'm going to call it input stuff. It's popping up with a red underlining here because we haven't actually defined this particular method just yet. You can tell that it's a method with the use of these rounded parentheses towards the end here. We've used many methods already up to this point, such as the writeLine method. You'll notice that these are popping up. We've also used the likes of the toUpper and toLower methods, also requiring the rounded parentheses to try and write things. So at this stage, another thing I'd like you to take a note of is the fact that now the start of our word here for input stuff has got a capital letter. This is called Pascal notation, and it's one of the conventions that we'd like you to follow here at Boys High, and also other organisations will use this very common convention. The reason for this is it means that whenever we see something beginning with a capital letter, we know that we're dealing either with a method that we're creating or accessing another class, which we don't need to worry about at this level. So this is one of our conventions, as well as the use of constants with uppercase and also regular camel case notation for dealing with local variables. Alright, so now that we've gone through and put this code in, we're telling it that we'd like to be calling an input stuff method. So in order to write our own method, we're going to pop down the bottom here, and we will simply go about following what we've got above the top here. And most importantly, we're going to use the name that we've outlined above. Now we don't need to go and put too much more in here. So the void part is important because it is telling the method that it doesn't need to return anything back to the item that's calling it. Okay, some languages refer to this as a subroutine. If we're wanting to return something back to our main program, we call this a method with a return type. Other languages call this a function. So I may use the term function and return method interchangeably from this point on. So in this particular method that we've just run, we're going to go through and do just a simple block of code which says hello world, and then we'll finish things off. And then at the very end here, we're going to do our console.readLine just to show how the flow of this program has now been altered somewhat. It hasn't capitalized things for me, I'll just do that now. And I'll put a couple of breakpoints on these methods so you can see how the program will jump backwards and forwards between these two methods that I'm calling. So running the program now, F5, jumping through this code here, it's now stopped at this point here, pushing F10 to step through it. I'm now calling the input stuff method. You'll notice now when I push the F10 button that it drops down to this next method that it's just jumped towards. So it will now go through to the bottom here, and then the flow of the program will then pop back up underneath this input stuff method and continue on underneath. Okay, so it's now outputting stuff to our console. Don't see it at this point because remember we're waiting for the console.readLine for the user to see what's happening. Okay, so there's our very first method up and running and working. So if we come out of that, take out some of those breakpoints, we've now created our own method. It doesn't return anything back to the main program that called it in terms of any variables or calculations that's been done. This static keyword here, these are often used in conjunction with a few things called access modifiers about who's got access to things, whether they're considered private, whether they're considered public, and that pretty much means who within the program, if we've got lots and lots of different pages, who can kind of refer to it. So by default they'll just be private static modifiers, and as a result of this we'll be able to only use them within this particular class. If we're wanting to go about accessing them in other ones, we'd need to change this to the likes of public. So the static keyword here means that it's referring to the type itself rather than an individual object that's been created. So just for our purposes, we'll just always place the word static before things, and we'll be looking to change this void term and the name of our called method are the two main things that we're going to want to alter when we're calling this. Alright, so let's go through now and do something that's a wee bit more meaningful than this. So I had a bit of an idea of what we might want to try and do. Well, let's create a method that will ask the user to be plugging something in. We'll go through and check to see whether something is valid, and then we'll simply output something towards the end of this. Okay, so jumping back into our program, we're going to go through and declare some variables at this stage. So why don't we go through and have a person's age being plugged in. Now, anytime you look at declaring a variable inside of the method, it means that it's only available to this particular method. So therefore, if I've got this variable called age and I'm wanting to use it up here, we're needing to access things in a slightly different way. So we can choose to pass the program things that it might need in order to do its job. At the moment, because I've just declared it within this particular method, the scope of this means that it's got method level visibility. Only this input stuff method can use it at this point in time. So at this stage, if we wanted to go through, maybe just chuck this on towards the end here. We could go through, plug that on. But obviously let's go through and do things a wee bit more meaningful. We could go through now at this stage and maybe ask the user to plug in their age. We could go through and using all of our concepts that we've done before, we could go through and do our try pass on it. Say where it's going to come from, so it'll come from the read line when they plug things in here, and if we can, we will look at outputting it into this data type, which is a integer, and it will be loaded in like so. So towards the end here, if we're wanting to go through and finish this off, let's go through now. Need to tweak a couple of things here, make sure I've got the right number of brackets. 1, 2, 3 going this way, 1, 2, we need a third one coming this way as well. No, get rid of that, and we'll just jump down. That should look at clearing the errors. Okay, so if what they've typed in is considered a number, we'll go about assigning it to this variable called age, and then we might want to go through and look at doing some form of validation on this age as well. So if the person's age is, I don't know, greater than or equal to 0, and the person's age is less than or equal to 120, we might choose at this situation to call it a valid age. Otherwise we're going to say that valid is equal to false. Now the reason why I've done this is because we will often want to try and perhaps keep asking this particular question until they have typed in something valid. So we would probably need to look at using something like some kind of boolean called valid that is going to be set to be while it is considered true. Let's run this. And let's do some kind of conditional while valid is equal to true. Let's run this block of code. Hasn't wanted to indent things for me, so I might just tidy this up a little bit. Okay, now if it is not valid, they're pretty much just going to get stuck in this loop here. So this block of code here with doing input stuff, if we try and run it here, let's go through. Okay, so the only thing that's going to allow it to finish is if they type in a valid integer that is within the correct range. We will then alter this to being the likes of true, which will then try about making toggle this particular item here. So while it's considered false, we'll keep running the loop. As soon as they have typed in something valid, we'll switch this from being true, from false to true, which will therefore exit the loop. Okay, so at that stage the flow of the program would then return back here. So if we type in something that is within a valid range in between here, you'll see this message appear. So let's go through and plug this in with a couple of breakpoints. Test our program now. See where the error is. Let's just pop on another bracket to see if that makes the difference. Yes, it does. Okay, so testing the flow of it, it's now jumped down to the bottom here. Age is now set to 0. Boolean's been initialized as the likes of true after this statement here. That's not really going to work, is it? Because we need to set this correctly to start with, otherwise it'll never run. Good teaching moment there, of course. Okay, so while this is valid is equal to false, let's keep doing this block of code. So it's going to ask the question, please type in your age. I'm going to accidentally type in something incorrect. Okay, it's going to pop down the bottom here, pops back up the top here, so it's going to get stuck at this stage. Alright, we're now going to try that again. I'll type in something that is considered invalid in terms of the range. It's a valid number, it'll get past this try pass statement because it is a valid integer. However, we will have problems with the fact that a -1 will not meet these conditions here. So we'll jump down here, make sure that this is reset to be false, back up towards the top there. Let's run this check one more time. So at this stage now, let's go and plug in a valid age. Pushing F10 to trigger this. Here it is, it's going to now make sure valid is equal to true. It will write this to the console, and then it will finish off the loop, therefore finishing off our method, popping back up the top there. Next line of code will be our read line. Okay, so although at this stage we haven't actually introduced too many new things because we can have done this simply within our main method, what this is trying to do now is show us that we can actually go through and call this input stuff anytime we're wanting to work with different numbers. So at the moment we've been working with two kind of hard-coded numbers of the likes of 0 or 120. But where methods become more useful and more robust and more flexible is rather than having some hard-coded numbers here, maybe we're wanting to deal with different things. So for instance, if we're wanting to deal with maximum salaries, we'd probably want to have some different types of ranges being used here. So rather than 0 and 120, we might say a maximum salary could be $600,000. So we would simply replace the likes of 120 for a variable that's been given to this particular method. So let's go through and show you how we might be able to do that now. So at this stage we've just been using a plain method that we've been calling, and you'll notice inside the parentheses here we can actually go through and we can tell it that we'd like to give it some different numbers. So for instance, if we'd like to go back to our example that I had before, if we had a maximum and minimum number that we'd like to give it, let's go through and try a couple of things here. So let's say let's give it a bit of money, decimal min salary equal to, I don't know, let's say 5,000 is the lowest money amount that we're going to try and be receiving. And then let's have a max salary, and we'll say 700,000. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's one too many. That's going to give us way too many. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to tell it when we call this input stuff method to actually go about giving it these two requirements in order to do its job. Which means that we need to go through and put a bit more of a description on here. Okay, so in here we're going to go through and tell it to look at receiving a couple of things. Now we need to use the data type in order for this to work correctly, and what I'm doing here is actually putting on the wrong data type deliberately, as you can see. And I can use, I need to declare a variable name as well. Now it's important to note that in this situation here, this min salary, even though it's been given the same name, is actually being given a copy of this value. So it's actually not able to update and alter this value. It's being given a value that is a copy of it. So what I'm going to do here is call it something slightly different, and I will have another one here called max salary copy, and you'll notice that we'll have some more errors, and the errors are basically saying that we're having a bit of a mismatch. Okay, so the best overload methods for intro.methods has some invalid arguments, and the arguments that we're having here is we cannot convert decimal to int. So these two values here are decimals, which are more precise than the likes of integers, so that is where we're getting stuck. If we had these set as integers, that wouldn't be a problem because we'd be getting more precise if we were moving from an int into a decimal. So what we're going to do here is we're going to change the likes of that to the fact that we need these to be the correct data type, which are decimals. Okay, so that's cleared those errors, and what's actually happening is when it gets to this point in time, it is going to pass min salary, which has got a value of 5,000, down to this parameter down here. So these things are referred to as arguments, and then the item that is receiving them are called parameters. So I'll probably just use the terms either arguments or parameters interchangeably. So it basically means the information needed for the method to do its job is being passed from one item to another. This is probably a bit of a difficult concept to understand. We've got two different ways in which we can pass things. We can pass things by val or by value, which is the default item that you can see here now, which means we're being passed a copy of this, which is why I've used this naming convention. And that's fine to use to try and help keep things nice and clear for you. Another way of being able to do things is we can pass things by reference. By passing things by reference, we're able to actually go through and tell it that we are passing things by reference. We need to be very clear that that is what we're trying to do. When we pass things by reference, it means that we're actually able to update this min salary. So in some situations we may wish to do that. If there are multiple things that we'd like to try and alter down here through the running of this method, that could be a situation that we might want to look at, such as like updating a total. But for our situation here, we're just going to keep this nice and simple and be passing things as a copy. Alright, so now that we've got that being plugged in here, we can go through and replace the likes of our hard-coded numbers here, okay, for something a little bit bigger. So if the age that the person has typed in is greater than the min salary copy, and it is less than the max salary copy, okay, let us do this. So we could use more generic names than this. We could call things like max and min. So if we were to pass down something else into this called method, we could then replace this with some kind of generic term. Okay, but it's just really showing you the concept of how things are flying from one part of the program down to the other, and how we can reuse the likes of this method. So let's just alter this slightly. Okay, so we've now going to tell it that the differences here should be between $5,000 and $700,000 as a number. Okay, so let's do a couple of breakpoints so you can see how this is going to work. Push F5, run the program now. F10, F10. Here it is. So our min salary and max salary is $705,000. Okay, down the bottom here, we haven't quite seen what this is being expecting at this stage. Push F10. Put our mouse over the top of it, you'll notice that min salary copy is holding the likes of 5,000, and our max salary has been passed this value of 700,000 in order for it to do its job. So now moving on down here, it's going to be asking that question, please type in your salary, and again if we were to go through and put a number slightly out of range, it would trigger the invalid type response popping through, therefore skipping this block of code. It would then ask that question again and again until I type in something within the correct salary range. Okay, so there's the program finishing, and we're routing things back to the page now here, things we're going to finish off. Alright, so if we were now wanting to have maybe something else being verified and passed down to it, let's go through and see how this might work. So a situation that we had before was a person's age that we're wanting to try and deal with, and we're now going to be using an age min, and we're going to say the person's age min, similar to what we had before, was going to be the likes of 0, and we will have an age max of 120, which we had before. Now, the variable names in which that I've used here haven't been that useful because of the fact that we've got them hard-coded as min salary, so I'd probably just call this min copy and max copy rather than these specific ones, but you'll get the idea of what I'm trying to achieve here now. So I'm going to call this same method once more, but rather than giving it the min salary, I'm going to give it this age min and age max. Okay, and I will do the console.readline again. So checking to see how our program will be flowing. It will go through, pass it in this situation here, the min salary, max salary. There it is, 5,000, 700,000. It's going to ask the question, please type in your salary. Here it is, we'll type in a valid number. It will say that's valid. It will write this to the console, pop back up the top here, return back to the main bit of code, do the read line, allow us to see that. This will finish now, and yet it will not because we're asking it to do a wee bit more work. I was waiting for a read line. Okay, so let's now continue on through. It's now going to be passing the program two things. It's going to pass it 0 and 120. So this is how we're able to now look at reusing this particular method to go through and validate to see whether it is in the correct age range. So even though I've used the term min salary, it's now going to make sure that the age that I type in is between a valid range. Okay, so at the moment here we're not getting the correct range, so it's going to skip this block of code, hit the else statement, and keep running the loop until I actually type in a valid age range. So let's do this now. Let's do 120, which is valid. Allow this code to be triggered, and it will now finish the program. Okay, so that is actually a program that has reused the same block of code, but we're passing it slightly different things. And as a result of that, our program becomes more flexible, more robust. So other things that we can do which are quite interesting is we could copy and paste this input stuff method, and we could just tweak it a little bit by giving it something slightly different. Okay, so for this particular one that I'm going to now look at running, I think I have missed off something here, just make sure it's okay. Alright, so I've pretty much got the same item here, just come out of break mode. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it one other thing. I'm going to give it a string, and I'm going to give it a message. So in this situation it's going to be called the same name, called input stuff, but this one is expecting to have three things or three parameters passed to it. So because of that, it now becomes smarter. It's now going to know that when I've got a method call above that is passing it three things, it's going to expect to look at not calling the first instance of input stuff, but the one here that can handle the likes of three things being passed to it. So we're actually going to be passing a string in the situation called age of person. So it won't do this one here because this is expecting two things. It will then skip this block of code and it will jump down here. So down the bottom here, this age of person message will be assigned to this variable here, and then I could look at changing this particular item here, and I could concatenate and drag this in. Okay, so this is now asking it to please type in your message that is being passed down from this item above. So it's going to say age of person. So let's show you how this is going to now run. It's going to go off and do all the things that it did before. That's fine, it's smart enough to know that it's going to pick out that first method. Okay, it's going to check this block of code to ensure that it is within the correct range, which it is. And then it's going to pop on and do the next block of code, which is going to pass it the age min and age max. Next thing that it will do is also pass it the message, which is age of person. And it's now able to use this in our console.writeLine message here to go through and show something a bit more meaningful. Okay, so that message, here it is, age of person, has been passed down to this particular method. I'm now going to plug in my message of the range. The information from above has come down, so it's actually triggering it again. And we could actually reuse that message again and again and again. That's trying to show you how we're now able to try and start making things a lot more, I guess, efficient and effective than what we've done in the past. Alright, so that's pretty much the first of our methods that we'd like to try and cover. You'll notice that the document or the program is flying backwards and forwards between the various methods as it's required. What we're going to try and do now is actually just tweak things a couple of times by altering this item here. So rather than it being a void method which doesn't return anything, we're going to have a check which allows it to go through and have something return back. So an item that we might want to try and look at returning back could be the results of a calculation. So let's go through and block out some code to skip some of the stuff from happening. Okay, so we'll look at kind of skipping a couple of lines of code here, so we'll just comment some of that stuff out. And this one here as well. Alright, so let's have a couple of items here being used. Let's have a variable for a total being worked on, and we'll give that a starting value of, say, 0. Okay, so we'd like a program that's going to total up two numbers, and it's going to do this within a called method, and then it's going to return the number, and it's going to be assigned to this variable called total. Alright, so let's go and create this method now. So we'll call it some total method, and for this one here, because we're going to have something returned, we're going to have a variable, in this case called total, that is going to remember what it uses. Okay, so I need to create a new method here called SumTotal. I can choose to give it any parameters or arguments as I may wish, but in this situation here, just to keep things simple, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to call it a static, and we're going to change this to an int in this situation because I would like to be returned. It's going to be the likes of an int, and I'm going to call it SumTotal, a couple of opening and closing parentheses. Right, so let's just keep this relatively straightforward in the fact that we are wanting it to be assigned a couple of values. Okay, so call it val1, and I'll give this say 10, and we'll call this int val2, and I might make that worth 20. Alright, now we're going to return a value now. Okay, so we're going to return the likes of the val1 plus val2 as a calculation. So whatever the results of this calculation are, I'd like to return this back to the main item that called it. Okay, and just in run mode, so just if I was to come out of this now, you'll notice this will actually appear a bit better. Okay, so getting a couple of messages here. The sum total does not exist in the current context. Let's just make sure that we finish this off correctly. Okay, so sum total. Push F5 and see if that clears things. No, it doesn't. Val2 does not exist in the current context. Does it return val1 plus val2? Okay, so a couple of issues that we've got going here. Name this incorrectly, so it should be val2, which will clear that particular error. Getting a message here, the name SumTotal doesn't exist in the current context. This relates to the fact that I've used a capital S to start with, and at the top here I've got it being lowercase, so managed to figure that out. A couple of these other errors we're going to deem as acceptable because of the fact that we've got commented code out and we're not wanting to do those calculations at this point. So it's just giving us a bit of a warning rather than an error as such. Okay, so if we were to go and try and run this program now, what's going to try and happen? Let's just put a couple of breakpoints on here showing you how this is going to try and operate. Run the program. It's going to go through and say total is equal to 0, F10 down to the next line. Let's call this method called SumTotal, jump to that block. It will then do a basic calculation. So it's going to return these two items added together, and then this is going to be returned back to this total here after this block of code. Okay, so that's how we can call upon a method with a return type. Other things that we may choose to do in here is we may choose to go through and maybe actually have the likes of the calculation done directly. And then we'd simply return the variable sum back to the program. That's one of the things that we can try and do. Other things that we could do is we could have maybe a variable called bool valid, and as a result it will return the fact that it's either true or false as something is being maybe some kind of calculation that's been performed. So if we could say if val1 plus val2 is less than 30, which it's not. Let's do that more obvious. If it's less than 20, let's go through and do that block of code. Else we may return valid equals false, so we may choose to give it something else. One of the issues that we're going to have when we do the likes of this, if we were just to change it, is our data type of what is being received is going to be slightly different now. Okay, so if we put here cannot implicitly convert bool to int, that's because at the top here we're expecting to have an integer being returned to it. So if I was to go and change this back to a boolean and say total, we're expecting you to be either valid, true or false, then that would try and clear the message in terms of being able to receive stuff back. One of the other issues that we sometimes have with this is because of the fact that sometimes our paths don't all return a value, and when we have a method call like this, each of the options that we try and allow need to be able to return something, because if we only had one popping up and say an else statement here, what happens if this is triggered? If it gets the block of code and doesn't know what to return, it'll get the likes of confused. Okay, so here what I'll go through and do is I'll make a copy of each of these just to clarify the code a little bit, and I will set each of these items to either true or false based on what is happening. Okay, so a couple of little tweaks here. Okay, so if val1 plus val2, let's just do a bit of BEDMAS here, make sure this is the case, is less than 20. So those two numbers of 10 and 20 are going to be smaller than 20. Okay, let's return this statement here, otherwise we'll return the likes of false. Otherwise what we're going to go through and do is return this item here, which is being declared and assigned further up. Still getting this issue at the top here, so total is equal to true. SumTotal. Let's try and run that and see if it's going to clear some of our errors. Okay, so a couple of little areas that we just need to try and tidy up here is the fact that we're wanting in this case to return a boolean, which is expecting across up the top here to receive a boolean, but we are getting an error saying it cannot implicitly convert type int to bool. Had a little bit of a look around trying to find the issue there, and the issue is relating to this. So remember from the very start where I said that we've changed it from void to int. So int is the data type that it's expecting to return back to the likes of the item that called it. So if I'm wanting to return in this situation a boolean now rather than an integer, I simply change that across into the likes of a boolean. So when this program is now going to be rerun, it'll go through and do the calculation, it'll jump down the bottom here, work out whether that condition is considered true or false. Okay, so those two numbers will trigger this block of code because it is not going to be less than 20, and it will return the likes of valid back to the main item that called it. Okay, so that's how we can return the likes of a boolean. Okay, so some of the things that we might want to look at covering now is the fact that if we're wanting to maybe check to see whether a number is valid, rather than using our system that we had down below here, we could go through and simply return valid equal true or valid equals false, and then we could use that through the running of our program to maybe do things like a loop until a condition is considered true or false. Alright, so that's effectively the use of methods with void methods and also return types. And got lots of examples that we can try and use, but for that program robustness, this example here, which goes about passing things different items, can be a useful way of improving the flexibility of your code. As I mentioned before, if you are going to get into the likes of a return type, if we were to go through and look at not putting in the likes of a return statement here and putting it directly within our code, we're going to be looking to have a few little errors or things that pop up because of the fact that not all items will go through and return something. Okay, so you'll get a little message that says not all code paths return a value. So the only thing that will return a value is this particular item here. If it is considered valid, it will trigger this code, pop to the bottom, and then it won't know what to return back to the main item. So that is where sometimes the variable assignment is useful, and then simply we'll go through and return the likes of valid back to the program at this stage. Okay, so that's pretty much all of our concepts now for level 2. It's just a matter of practicing these and just asking questions, clarifying things, and giving these lots of practice to try and improve about how we can use them in code. Okay, so good luck team, and all the best.